What's going on, guys? Thanks for tuning back into the channel. Today, let's just go ahead and talk about two of my favorite Harley Davidson Softail models, the Heritage Classic and the Harley Davidson Fatboy. We'll do a comparison of these two iconic Harley Davidson models, some of the similarities, some of the differences, and I'll talk about what I like and dislike about each model. And at the end of the video, I'll talk about which one I think comes out on top. So without further ado, let's get going. I know that the hot Softail models have been some of the newer models like the Lowrider ST, but a lot of people would consider the Fatboy and the Heritage the bread and butter of Harley Davidson. The Harley Davidson Fatboy was designed by Willie G. Davidson and Louis Netz. Harley built the prototype Fatboy in Milwaukee for the Daytona Bike Week Rally in 1988 and 1989. It's often noted that the name Fatboy was named after the atomic bombs dropped on Japan during World War II as a symbolic insult to the Japanese motorcycles. However, in a 2015 interview with Harley Davidson's Vice President Scott Miller, he said that the name only referred to its size. Take that for what you will, I guess we'll really never know the truth. In 2018, the Fatboy moved over to the Softail frame and Showa rear monoshock suspension, which replaced the twin shocks, which provides a more comfortable and better controlled ride and improved handling. Harley Davidson claims the 2018 chassis is stiffer and lighter than the earlier Softail and Dyna platforms. Further upgrades include an LED headlight and 18-inch Lakester rims with a wide 160mm front and 240mm rear tire. Overall, the Fatboy is currently one of my favorite Harleys today, with a mix of heritage, a great blend of classic and modern looks. It's a head turner everywhere you go, and it's just a badass motorcycle. Now, on the other side of the equation, the Heritage Classic looks like a Harley that's been frozen in time. And in all honesty, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The roots of the Softail heritage can be traced back to the 1980s, when Harley Davidson aimed to marry the classic look of the hardtail frame with the comfort of a rear suspension. The result was the innovative Softail chassis designed to mimic the lines of the rigid frame while incorporating hidden rear shocks. This breakthrough in design laid the foundation for the Softail series, with the Heritage model emerging as a true embodiment of Harley's timeless aesthetic. As I was doing some research, I've heard that even though this Heritage Classic looks like an old school bike, it's still a hot seller in several Harley dealerships, and for good reason. So we'll get more into that later in this video. When comparing the two iconic Harleys, there's a lot of similarities that these two bikes share. Both obviously have a rich time-tested history, but they've been modernized with a Milwaukee 8 114 V-twin engine that boasts about 120 foot-pounds of torque and 86 to 90 horsepower. They're also built on the same Softail chassis, which delivers a smoother ride than its predecessors, and these two Softails are designed with comfort in mind. They both have a relaxed seating position with 4 controls, large floorboards, and are equipped with cruise control. They both have 5-gallon tanks, making them capable for light touring, and they both come in around 730 pounds, with the Heritage being slightly heavier than the Fatboy. They also both come in just north of $20,000, with the Heritage costing about $1,000 more than the Fatboy. So let's talk about some of the differences. In terms of ergonomics and comfort, they're both fairly comfortable, like I mentioned. Now, to me, I'm coming in at 5'8", and I found both of these cruisers to be really comfortable, but in my opinion, the Heritage Classic just edges out the Fatboy for a couple of reasons. The taller handlebars on the Heritage Classic is going to be better suited for longer rides, and it's better suited for taller riders as well. The Mini Ape handlebars on the Heritage Classic is also a must if you're going to cruise on the highway for a long period of time. The second reason is the seat on the Heritage Classic. The stock seat on a Heritage Classic is the most comfortable stock seat that I've ever been on a Harley. With Harleys, usually the stock seat is the first thing to go and the first thing that you want to upgrade because you want to be comfortable on a cruiser. But with the Heritage Classic, the stock seat is plush and leaves very little fatigue to the rider. Next, we'll talk about utility. The Heritage Classic is one of the few Softails that if you wanted to roll the bike off the lot and tour with it, you can pretty much do so. It comes with lockable saddlebags, it has detachable windscreen, tall handlebars. Honestly, if you need to rent a motorcycle and you need some touring capacity, this is that bike. It's lighter than a bagger, so it's more nimble than, say, a road glide, and yet it still has a lot of the amenities that you need. If you're not ready to move up to a full bagger but you still want to be able to do some light touring, the Heritage Classic is really a great compromise. The Fatboy, on the other hand, doesn't come with any of those amenities. It doesn't come with the bags, the windshield, or the handlebars. Of course, you can add those things to the Fatboy, but that's obviously going to be at an additional cost. So in terms of utility, we have to give another nod to the Heritage Classic on this category. Next category is ride and handling. Now this is where it gets kind of interesting because I can see where people might start having different opinions on this subject, but I'll weigh in with mine here. Long story short, in terms of handling different types of riding situations, whether you're cruising on the highway or just bobbing around town to cornering curves on a mountain road, honestly, I prefer the overall agility of the Heritage Classic. It is surprisingly nimble for its size, and once you're on the Heritage Classic, it doesn't feel like a 700-pound cruiser. It's very light on its feet, and handling on this bike is really a breeze. Now the Fatboy on the other hand is a little different. Because of the fatter tires, I believe that there is a learning curve to the Fatboy. Negotiating corners and leaning into turns take a bit more effort than other Harleys, and the Fatboy wants to immediately get you back to center as soon as you lean. I think for most people who haven't ridden a Fatboy or aren't used to riding big chunky tires might find this a little unusual, but like most things, once you get used to the riding style, it becomes second nature. However, because of the fatter tires on the Fatboy, to me the ride was just really comfortable because of how effortlessly straight this bike rides. It just kind of plugs away like a freight train. When I think of long straight stretches of road, this is the bike that I would like to take. For me, I think the ride and handling category goes to the Heritage Classic again, just because of how flexible it is in different applications, and I think it'll suit a lot of different riders. The last category on this one is the aesthetics, and in terms of aesthetics, both bikes are Harley's take on classic bikes with a ton of history. The Harley Fatboy is, I would consider, more of a modern take on a classic cruiser with its large nacelle, lake-stirred wheels, and the Heritage Softail still looks very reminiscent of the old Heritage Classic. On this category, I'm gonna go with the saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So while I would personally prefer the Fatboy, I think we're gonna give this one a tie. Alright, so what do I like about the Fatboy? I think what I love most about the Fatboy is really just the attitude and the attention that it commands when it's parked or sitting in your garage. I always had a thing for motorcycles with large fat tires. It just looks so good. And to me, this is the kind of bike that I would just stare at for hours if it was in my garage. And I would baby it and I would probably clean it more than I would like to admit. To me, the Fatboy is one of the best looking cruisers out there, and it's like owning a piece of history. So what do I dislike about the Fatboy? Honestly, I don't mind that the Fatboy takes a bit more effort to lean into the corners. I think that's part of the charm with the Fatboy, but what's hard to justify is that price tag. It's just hard to justify $20,000 for a simple Harley with the 114 engine, especially when you're comparing it with some of the other Softails that give you a little bit more options. The Fatboy just feels a little light in terms of any special features outside of its history and design that set it apart from the other models. In terms of what I like about the Heritage Classic, if I had to give a moniker to the Heritage Classic, it's really the sleeper Harley. In my opinion, Harley doesn't really promote this bike enough. You rarely hear about the Heritage Classic, but the Heritage is a bike that can really do it all, and it does it well. And not only that, it doesn't need a whole lot of modifications to get it set up right. You don't have to fuss around and spend hundreds or thousands of dollars in the aftermarket parts to get it ready for touring. And not only that, it's one of the most nimble cruisers out there. With every Harley Softail that I've tested out there, there's usually like one or two things that, just kind of doesn't suit me, or I would change out immediately. But with the Heritage Classic, I honestly cannot find anything that I would change to make it better suited for my riding style. In terms of what I dislike about the Heritage Classic, to be honest, there's not much to dislike about the Heritage Classic in my eyes. To me, the Heritage Classic is a bit too old school for me personally. I'm borderline Gen X millennial, and I gravitate towards a bit more of a modern aesthetic like the Fatboy or the Lowrider S. The leather studded seat and the bags just really don't suit my style, but again, that's all preference at this point. But maybe the point is, if that's what I'm picking on as a major dislike, I think that in and of itself says something about the Heritage Classic. This is a bike that I absolutely didn't like before I rode it. I judged the book by its cover. I told myself I would never be caught dead on that bike because it's just not my style, but after riding the Heritage Classic, it completely changed my mind, and it really just messed me up in a good way. Alright, so that wraps up the discussion around the Harley Davidson Heritage Classic and the Fatboy. Whichever way you end up going with these two bikes, I don't think you can really lose. But if I'm being honest, on paper and really, real life application, I have to admit the Heritage Classic just checks off so many boxes. Like I mentioned in the video, it's a sleeper Harley Davidson, meaning it's often overlooked, but it does everything so incredibly well. There's really not a lot of things that I can kind of nitpick or complain about on the Heritage Classic. Between the two bikes, if I'm being practical and or pragmatic, I would have to go with the Heritage Classic. Even though I think the Heritage Classic is really a better bike, I have to say there's just something about the Fatboy that, I'm just drawn to it. And maybe it's the looks, maybe it's the attitude, maybe it's how I think I look on the bike. But for whatever reason, I just really love the Fatboy. But at 20 to 21K, it's kind of a hard pill to swallow. So anyways, if I only had one bike in my garage, if I were to choose, I would probably have to go with the Heritage Classic, just because it can suit so many different type of riding formats. But at the end of the day, they say, when you park your bike and walk off, and if you don't look at the bike, you've made the wrong decision. I don't know if I would look back at the Heritage. I would definitely look back at the Fatboy and just be really proud that I own this iconic motorcycle. So I'm kind of stuck. One is a really good practical motorcycle, which is good at everything, and then the other is just such a great looking motorcycle. It's hard to choose. Let me know what you guys would choose. Let me know what you think. Have you test ridden either of the bikes? Let me know in the comments what you think, what you would go with. But that's enough for me today. I'm gonna bounce out of here. Thanks for tuning into the video, and until next video, I'll see you later. Peace.